With you on Drive, 26 minutes to 6 is the time. The Monday Political Forum. Linda Burney is the Shadow Minister for Indigenous Australians and the Labor MP for the Sydney seat of Barton. Andy Marks is the Assistant Vice-Chancellor at the University of Western Sydney. He's one of those wretches who did humanities, I think, at some stage or another. We'll find out whether it did him any good. And Bruce Baird is a business leader and former Liberal Party federal MP and New South Wales Minister. Bruce, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Richard.
Are you a humanities man, Bruce?
I am. I did an arts degree, then an MBA. So of the family of five, my wife and I and three children, 4 out of the 5 did arts degrees, the other one did economics. So if we were going up now, we'd be paying extra money.
You'd be up for a fortune, you lot, the Bairds.
Yeah, that's right. We feel as if we've contributed in our own small way, but obviously not enough.
We will come to this topic in a little while. Linda Burney, but just give us we're going to talk a little bit later about that. Are you a humanities person or an engineer or a scientist?
I trained to be a school teacher.
Well, that's humanities, isn't it?
Well, I think it is. I think we need humanities.
We will get to this in a second. But first, a spike in COVID cases in Victoria brings a call for this state, New South Wales, to close its border, as Queensland's done. Our Premier is wary of the economic impact of border closures, but with Victoria in danger of a growing second wave, should it be considered? Linda Burney.
I think it's really important, Richard, and hello to the other panellists, that we remind ourselves that the New South Wales-Victorian border has been open for the whole period of coronavirus. And we've got the school holidays coming up, so that's obviously something to be considered. And the other thing is that I'm not especially surprised. I mean, you think about New South Wales today, Richard, there were 2 new cases. In Victoria, there's been 16 new cases. And at the end of the day, it really is the decision of state and territory premiers and first ministers as to what they do. And I think the most important thing is that as we have been, and Australia's been remarkable and Australians have been remarkable, is to follow the health advice. And I think that the Premier of Victoria, Dan Andrews, and the Premier of New South Wales, Gladys Berejiklian, probably have a lot more information than you and I and our listeners, and I'm sure they are making the right decisions.
There's got to be a point, though. Blessedly, this won't. Hopefully, this won't happen. But if it really got out of hand in Victoria, you'd then have to think about it, wouldn't you?
I think that's obviously why the Premier of New South Wales sought an urgent briefing this morning. And the really important thing is to see how things go and to keep a very close eye on what's happening in other states and territories. I mean, the Queensland border has been a hard border for a long time. Mark McGowan, I think, closed the Western Australian borders and then borders within Western Australia way back in early April. So I think it's a matter of staying calm, listening to what the health advice is, and trusting that the premiers have got more information than we have and are making clear decisions.
Bruce Baird, the Prime Minister, said, this is obviously not great news, but we have done a good job and we have to expect that there'll be these little surges which we are then now quite well placed to deal with because it's not happening 2 months ago, but it's happening now. Is that a fair enough point of view?
I think it's a fair enough assessment, and obviously if you look at New Zealand, which was regarded as the icon, it's had 3 new cases, I think, in the last 24 hours. So I think obviously from a health perspective, safety is paramount, but for the tourism industry, and I declare an interest being chair of the Tourism and Transport Forum, is that there's just huge uncertainty in the industry, and it's the tourism industry has been losing about $10 million per month. And there's 400,000 people directly involved in the industry. So there's $6 billion just from domestic travel alone. So to continue to cut that off or to put up new barriers, I don't think it's appropriate. I think it's about people being responsible, not going into the infected areas to try and restrict travel to essential travel only.
What about Queensland? Should they reopen that border with us?
Well, I believe so. I mean, Queensland is holding out, but There's some 30% of the Queensland economy depends on tourism, and there's a huge number of jobs there. If people are responsible and careful, it's going to be managed, and cases are going to continue to emerge, as we've seen around the world. But let's also think about the economic consequences, and so many young people and others without jobs at the moment, huge numbers in the tourism industry alone.
Andy Marks, we've got getting that particular balancing act right between caution and the economy?
Oh, look, it's hard to criticise the public health response, but I worry that the balance is tipping in favour of economic imperatives. And, the virus doesn't respect borders, and I don't think a knee-jerk reaction back to the principles of federation and closing borders is necessarily the way to go at this. I think that, we've got to look at what other countries that have had a second wave are doing. So Israel and Norway and Vietnam, countries that managed it well, but now are seeing an uptick. They're all relying on contact tracing. So localised data, that's street-by-street stuff, house-by-house stuff. It's not something that you can just, draw a line under with a state border. So I'd be more inclined to trust things like the contact tracing.
We talked to the head of it, the New South Wales head of it, the other day. Gee, she was impressive, and the whole office sounded impressive. They've drawn on expertise. There were army people there, and people from emergency services, the SES, and lots of obviously New South Wales health people. And they're ringing as soon as you've got a case, they're ringing up everyone everyone you've been in contact with.
Yeah, they're absolutely on the money, and that's how you work against something like this. It is a very, very localised, and it is person to person by nature of its transmission. So, we should always rely on the advice of the health authorities, but I just worry that the pendulum's switching a little bit more towards economic recovery. That's critical, of course. But yeah. I
mean, some people would say the reason why the pendulum is swinging a little bit is that we're better placed with cases. We know we've built extra facilities. We've got the ventilators in. We know that if we've got cases, we can deal with them. That was not the situation on March 15 when we locked down.
No, that's right. We've bought ourselves breathing room. And that's where, tools like contact tracing now really come into play. And it's really heartening to hear that they're so dedicated and so resourced on that front. Yeah,
Linda Burney, Andy Marks, Bruce Baird are with us. Welfare recipients will receive a 50% discount on some police-issued fines, such as those for speeding and illegal parking. The state government says it's designed to ease the burden of those doing it tough because of COVID. But some say it's just subsidising bad behaviour. So here's one of those, the announcement was made yesterday, but it's really a big philosophical question at the heart of this announcement by the Berejiklian government. And I guess it goes like this. Should a poor person pay their traffic fine at a different rate to a rich person? Linda Burney, what do you reckon?
Look, I think this is really complex, and I did listen to the radio this afternoon, and the Premier was making it clear it was by application. It's not this blanket rule that's going to exist. My particular view is that, as Andy just said, there are so many people that have been disenfranchised by this virus, and poor people in particular were doing it tough anyhow. And I think that this is probably something that won't be as taken up as much as people are thinking. But at the end of the day, Richard, when you have a look at jails in New South Wales, a big bulk of the people, particularly Indigenous people, are in for less than 6 months, and it's often to do with fines and parking issues and issues with cars. So I think we need to see it in the context of who we are talking about here, and the fact that there is not going to be a blanket application. It's by people applying. And I think the philosophical point is a reasonable one, but you have to think of the many initiatives that have been undertaken because of COVID to try and ease the burden, including Job Seeker and JobKeeper, that I actually think it's a reasonable thought to have, and I do hope that it's dealt with in a very sensible way.
I mean, maybe we should bring this in all the time, in the sense, and for lots of fines, in the sense that $500 does mean less to a person who's wealthy than it means to a person that's poor. It's a bigger penalty, you could argue.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, people that were living on what was the old New Start, now called Job Seeker, were living on $40 a day. And when you think if you're, a parent with 3 children or a single mum trying to make rent, trying to make decisions between things like, do I get the script fill or do I buy dinner tonight? I mean, they're the real life decisions that people are making, and I can't stress enough just how tough people are doing it. They really are.
Bruce Baird, should wealthy people pay fines at a different rate than poor people?
Well, look, on one level, the old saying, you do the crime, you pay the fine. And, to have concessions if you exceed the speed limit a very significant way, or you're caught with a breathalyzer, or you don't do the right thing as part of the community, then you should take the responsibility. But the difference in this is you've got to apply for it. And a friend of mine who recently applied for some consideration of fine he thought was unfair, he was granted that exemption. And I think the concept of compassion and concern at this time, I think, is paramount, because there's so many people doing it tough. And while none of us would like to think that people are going to get off their fines, but some consideration for those who are unemployed, and maybe there are special reasons why that this particular fine occurred.
Why not outside COVID then? If it's such a good principle, isn't it a good principle for all time?
Well, I think that applies. Outside of COVID, if you get the normal fine, you can have the ability to apply if you think there are special circumstances why you should be exempted.
But in this case, being a welfare recipient is sufficient circumstance that, as I understand it, the deduction then would occur pretty much automatically.
Yeah, well, and as long as it's not an extreme crime,
this is about
speed limit.
Yeah, this is about police-issued crimes. I don't think it's about, it's not about some, terrible bank robbery.
I think compassion should be the keynote at this point.
Bruce Baird is here, so is Linda Burney. Andy Marks, what do you reckon? I just think it's such an interesting sort of idea, really, that you should take into account the pain of paying.
Yeah, look, it's exactly as Bruce and Lindy have said. It's cumulative. People have choices descend upon them in terms of whether they will pay one bill, in favour of another. And I think it's taken a pandemic for governments to start thinking about treating marginalised people decently. The increase in job seeker, rapidly rehousing people who are experiencing homelessness, preventing evictions, now this discount on fines. I think it's long before time we had a discussion about this, and it's a shame that it's taken this to be the trigger for it. But yeah, I think it's entirely fair that those things account for somebody's circumstances as a whole. I
suppose the argument on the other side is you're putting someone's life at risk. If you put someone's life at risk and someone on welfare puts someone's life, it's the same crime.
Yeah. Yeah, look, it comes at it case by case. I think that's, it is on application. But as a general principle, what do we want to see here? Do we want to see people spiral into unresolvable debt that leads to all sorts of other socio-economic challenges? Or do we want to approach people compassionately, as Bruce said? I reckon that's the kind of society we want to be.
Yeah, here's a little interesting comment from Damon on the text regarding Richard's comment that the fines could be based on income. In Hong Kong, this is what they actually do. For regular fines, you go to court. The judge asks you in court what your wage is and then comes back with a discretionary fine. I experienced this when working there. That's from Damon on the text. Linda Burney is here, the Labor MP for Barton. So is Andy Marks, who's Assistant Vice-Chancellor at the University of Western Sydney, and former Liberal Party federal MP and business leader Bruce Baird. Now, the government wants to reduce the cost of degrees in science and engineering in our universities, areas which it says will provide the jobs of the future, while sharply increasing the cost of degrees in the humanities. Some have accused the government of being deaf to the value of the humanities, but is it just an attempt to provide, as they say, the skills we'll need? Andy Marks.
Yeah, look, this is a really curly one because, I've wasted my life, Richard. I'm thinking now in reflection, studying politics and literature. But
fool!
What was I thinking?
Yes. What good is Shelley now?
I know,
Keats?
right? I'm struggling to hold down a job, and look. I think you need to look at what education's about in its broader sense, and it's not just about landing a job. It's about the contribution you make more broadly to society, and I think it was Tim Palmerston wrote on the weekend that I think 5 of our last 7 PMs had arts degrees, and does that automatically mean they were unqualified for their position? You have to think about the contribution that people make in other disciplines as well. We have a situation where, in STEM-based disciplines, so science, technology, engineering and maths, you need people with critical inquiry. Not everyone is going to be a mechanic, or not everyone's going to, be involved in digital technology at the front line, but people are going to want to know how we interpret that technology. That's where these disciplines come in. I think, some of the issues we have geopolitically with China and with other trade confrontations, they're solved. Those issues, and the heat is taken out of those issues through people trained in the humanities. So we just need to think very carefully before we start ascribing value to things on the basis of, really simplistic articulations of who does and who doesn't get a job.
Yeah, no, you're an assistant vice-chancellor at the University of Western Sydney. How will the universities react to these new funding models? Because it not only changes the differential between STEM and non-STEM, it also has changed the amount of government funding. People will be paying for a larger proportion of their education than they used to, almost whatever course they're doing.
Yeah, look, well, that's not going to impact the kind of courses that universities offer. I mean, universities will and always have, offer a broad range of disciplines that treat knowledge, not just as an economic mechanism. I think one of the things you'll see, which is of concern to us, is that, roughly a quarter of our 45,000 students in Western Sydney do humanities disciplines. And in the main, a lot of Indigenous students, a lot of students from low socioeconomic backgrounds choose humanities. And we're concerned about the impact that these measures might have on them. Will the cost imposition see them shy away from a course structure like that? But the other thing you've got to think about is how do these things impact across the broader system? University and TAFE, I think, have been poorly resourced on the part of governments in many, in years gone by. And I think, yes, we need to have new places released. Yes, we need more domestic students getting further education. But I don't think we want to go to the extent of determining what they do by means of a crude sort of price mechanism.
Linda Burney, is this particularly an issue, as Andy suggests, for Indigenous students?
It is an issue for Indigenous students, and it's precisely what Andy said, that many Indigenous students do humanities, particularly in areas where they feel that they want to give back to the Indigenous community and the broader community. And when you have a look at what the government's done, it's quite curious to me, using, as Andy said, a price mechanism where you've got a agricultural maths degree decreasing by 62%, and a humanities degree increasing by 113%. Is that going to stop people from doing humanities? I don't know the answer to that, but I suspect that it won't, because some people are drawn to humanities because of their background. Some people are drawn to law. Some people are drawn to the STEM subjects. But I don't know that the government's going to be successful by using a price mechanism like this to push people towards particular subjects. Now, their mantra, understandably, is about jobs, jobs and more jobs. But is this the way to actually achieve it, by determining through a price mechanism what people should study and what people should be drawn to? There is no way, when I was a student, Richard, that I would have looked at one of the STEM subjects, and I'm sure that there are many people out there listening who have a passion to do humanities, and we've got to have our historians, we've got to have our writers, we've got to have our artists, we've got to have our philosophers, and society broadly really relies on those arts disciplines to actually function and reflect itself.
Okay, that's interesting. Maybe the price signal, whether it's intelligent or not, maybe it just won't work. After all, Bruce Baird, it is all covered by HECS anyway. There's an imposition of a bigger fee, but it's a fee that's paid in the future. Is this suddenly going to do what the government seems to want to do, which is turn off the tap of humanities and turn it on for STEM?
It's going to make people tougher for people who are doing art.
You're
and as an art graduate,
you're breaking up, Bruce. I might just try to get you on a different line there, and we'll come back to Bruce Baird in just a second. Let me try to quickly check the traffic while we're trying to get Bruce Baird back, because we really couldn't hear what he was saying at that point. Let's just find out what is happening on the roads.
Traffic, ABC Radio Sydney.
At Lansville, Hume Highway at Lansdowne Road, multiple vehicles involved in a crash there. The highway is affected in both directions. At Tempe, the lights are flashing yellow. Princes Highway at Smith Street, traffic is affected again in both directions. At Botany, Southern Cross Drive near Botany Road, a car breakdown there. Significant delays southbound. And at Forestville, Warringah Road near Forestville Avenue, a bus breakdown with one westbound lane out. At Liverpool, Hume Highway at Hoxton Park Road, a semi-trailer breakdown. They have cleared it, but heavy traffic conditions northbound. That's the latest here on Drive.
You're with Richard Glover on ABC Radio Sydney.
Yeah, it's currently 5 minutes to 6 here on Drive. Have I got Bruce back? Bruce? I'll have to hit it again, do I? Okay. Bruce, good afternoon. How are you? Sorry about that. Yeah, humanities and the price signal, whether it'll work and whether it's a good idea.
Well, from as I said before, a family of 5 that we're 40 arts degrees, and I think we've managed to struggle along as a group. And I think it's a very bad decision. I mean, it is downgrading the value of humanities and the arts sector and literature and understanding that. I mean, when I did an MBA, it was when we work as groups, it was the engineers and the accountants turned to me to write the report that we did as a group. And the background is, if you have a look at the employment rates, arts graduates...
No, it's fallen off entirely. Look, I think we got the gist. Strong support for the value of the humanities from Bruce Baird. We have Linda Burney, Andy Marks and Bruce with us. Just finally, July 1 marks the return of the driving test, that arduous process under which one attempts to get one's P's. Do you remember your own travails when learning to drive? Andy Marks, what about you?
Again, maybe this is points to my poor education, but Richard, I actually learnt to drive on a Valiant Charger, and a very, very recklessly powerful vehicle in the hands of a novice, and I got it for $450 from a bloke at the back of Stanmore. And I remember stalling it and on the biggest hill coming up to Edgware Road. And, I had to learn how to do a hill start pretty quickly, or the traffic behind me was about to sort of get out and let me know what for. But, the other thing about driving around those inner city laneways is I managed to turn a 3-point turn into a 10-point turn.
I remember that too. Linda Burney, did you pass the test first time or did you take 3 goes?
I am not sure I should tell this story, but it involved learning to drive in a very small country town, going for my driving test in that same country town, driving a Holden station wagon with the column shift. There was one traffic light there was one stop sign in that town which I drove through and still got my licence.
A kindly cop?
Very lovely cop.
Bruce Baird, did you pass first time or not? Did you pass first time? Sorry.
Yes, when I did, and when I've completed it, the guy said you drove technically very well, but watch your speed, otherwise you're in trouble. And 3 weeks later, I had a major prang due to speed.
You should have listened to him. And with all that training in your arts degree, you should have taken the evidence and assessed it and known he was right.
I know. What did the arts degree do for me then?
Yes, well, as we humanities students know, it's all about assessing the evidence. Hey, we're out of time, but thank you very much to Bruce Baird. He's the business leader and former Liberal Party federal MP and New South Wales Minister. To Andy Marks, Assistant Vice-Chancellor at the University of Western Sydney. Andy, thank you.
Thank you.
And to Linda Burney, Shadow Minister for Indigenous Australians, Labor MP for Barton, and someone who passed the test first time. Linda, thank you very much.
Thanks, Richard.